will have less options in the box and less models in the box, but they will look more detailed and larger scale. Why? Not because it looks good on your shelf, but because it's easier to pick up on camera at live tournaments.
Wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Regiment. You ever watch a video that was just so bad that you had to make a response to it, that you just felt so compelled to make a response? This is one of those videos. Now, I'm going to say a lot of words, and I want to just make it clear right off the get-go, I have no real ill will against Northern Exile. Who's Northern Exile? Well, Northern Exile is a 40k YouTuber. As you can see, he does a lot of 40k content, mostly just rants. I think he does like at least one rant every 2 weeks. And he does a lot of like hobby nightmares. So he's a bit of one of those 40k YouTubers who do a lot of blackpilling. Now, I've only watched a couple of his videos. I think about 4 or 5 of them. And it's very typical of what you would find when it comes to these 40k blackpillers that, GW has always done everything wrong. Which, yeah, they've done a lot of wrong, to be fair. But, the sky's falling, 40k is dead, it's over, it's done with. It's like the same thing we hear every 5 years. Or, every time the edition changes, it feels like. However, there was one video in particular that I take umbrage on, and that video is the 10th edition is ending, so what now, a 40k rant. Now, he doesn't only talk about 10th edition 40k. He does talk about GW in general, and this is where he makes a lot of problems. And it's very evident for anyone who's just been following GW or just been in the hobby, all the kind of mistakes that he's making. However, I don't want to go and say that the entire video is bad. In fact, he does actually make some good points. And I'm going to start this video with the good points that I think that he actually made during the video. First point he made was he was talking about Warhammer Plus. And that Warhammer Plus should have more content. And I believe this is actually fair. I believe Warhammer Plus should also have more content in the form of the old codexes, and the old rule books, and the old splat books, and everything else like that. Like the books that you physically can't get anymore from GW. I mean, you can probably find them on secondhand markets, but it is literally free money for Warhammer Plus if they're like, hey, here's the all the splat books from the old Warhammer Fantasy, or here's all the splat books from Road Trader, or the early editions of Warhammer 40k, or anything else like that. Because this will bring people that, even though they're not liking the current edition, it'll still bring them into the fold, because they'll have information or books from the older editions that they can still use. So I do think that's one good point. Another point that he made, he kind of walks around this topic, and we'll get into this later, about esports and tournaments. Now, I actually think 40k, or rather, I'm just going to say GW in general, when it comes to like high-level tournaments, they should actually broadcast those onto Twitch and YouTube. So it gives people who do follow the hobby a look into what a high-level play would be like. Because, we all have different skill levels. I'm not saying that I'm the best Age of Sigmar player. I do play Age of Sigmar. But it would be neat to see what a high-level player would actually look like. Because, again, in my area, I live in a small town. So I'm not going to be able to see people who are world-renowned. Like, they don't live next to me. They don't go to my hobby shop, So having to actually be able to see that on like a Twitch or YouTube as like a weekly or like a week-long event type thing, I think that would actually be pretty neat. And it kind of gives it like more publicity. They can jazz it up. They can do a lot more with that. Now, I would actually even take that one step further. And although he doesn't talk about this, but I would actually have a Golden Demon showcase as well, probably on Twitch. Now, I would not have the showcase be run by the Golden Demon judges, but I would have a team that would go into, or like, a team of 2 people, 3 people maybe, go into Golden Demon and just look and record at some of the Golden Demon entries. And, maybe like talk to the artists who are there, or the modelers, and like, hey, what's this entry about? What were your feelings? And really kind of get like a deep dive into some of these phenomenal models that are on Golden Dragon. And again, And Golden Dragon is chock full of phenomenal models, and the paint jobs are just so good. So I would actually even go one step further. And again, they can also make that as like a huge event as well, to get more PR or more marketing and stuff like that. More marketing is always good. And he also makes a good point about the codexes. Now, when it comes to GW, I believe the last edition of the Guard Codex was outdated a few weeks. Actually, I think it was outdated by even when it released, because there was just different keywords, if I remember correctly, that were incorrect, and there was just things that were already outdated, when it released, or even a few weeks after it launched. There's no excuse for this. To be completely honest with you, there's no excuse that your codex that cost, anywhere between, depending on where you are in the world, $30 to $60 should be completely useless, or have parts of it be completely useless as soon as it launches. There needs to be more quality control when it comes to the codexes. So it's actually a product worth buying. And so they definitely need more quality control. Although, yeah, I haven't really heard a lot on the Age of Sigmar side, or even like the Older World side when it comes to that. It's mostly the 40K, and I do believe this is emblematic of 40K making so much money that it can, kind of mess up. It can do a bit of fuck ups, because they know that like it's just the money printing machine, and they don't really have to try as hard. And funny enough, someone actually pointed this out when it comes to the models. If you look at the new models coming out for Age of Sigmar, even Old World, like if you look at like Grand Cathay versus what the some of the Space Marine refreshes that we got recently, I mean, it's like night and day. You can see that like they just did not give a shit about one, because they knew people were going to buy it. And when it comes to like the Age of Sigmar or like Old World, they're like, yeah, they got like the top team on it. Even on my old video, well, I say old, it's only a few weeks old, when I was talking about Grand Cathay in the first reveal, I believe I said, and I definitely said it on his Twitter, but I believe I said in the video, that clearly the Age of Sigmar modeling team helped out with the Grand Cathay models, and not the 40K team, because the Age of Sigmar team is just so much better when it comes to detailing, and it's just like, yeah, again, night and day. So he is right about that, about the codexes being outdated. There's no excuse. And now we get to the bad points, and I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off just right away and go with what I showed in the intro about models. Okay. Models are not getting bigger because it's easier to show up on camera when you live stream it on Twitch. I'm just going to say that's not the reason. I don't know why he thought that was the reason. I just don't know why. Now, this is part of a bigger context. So I'm going to play a clip of basically what he's talking about when it comes to 40K and the tournament scene.
They will expand into the tournament scene, taking 40K away from casual play to a more manageable, universal, esports style of game about crunching numbers and great plays. They will continue to drip feed releases, keeping the codex system that is extremely outdated as the main source of rules for factions, outdating them within weeks of their publication with changes and tweaks that you can find online. This, instead of being seen as a failure though, will be seen as a triumph of Games Workshop listening, quote-unquote, by the masses. Any range refresh that does arrive will have less options in the box and less models in the box, but they will look more detailed and larger scale. Why? Not because it looks good on your shelf, but because it's easier to pick up on camera at live tournaments.
Right, so as he said, it's a 5-year plan that he thinks that GW is going to go towards. That GW is going to focus more on tournament play, and it's going to ignore the casual players behind. It's just going to be focused on really streamlined tournament play, and it's going to be all broadcasted on Twitch. I think that's kind of stupid. Also, when it comes to, I'm just going to talk about the models again real quick. If GW really wanted to make all the models bigger so they can fit on camera when it's being streamed on Twitch, two things. One, they always would have done it. They're still making models on 28mm bases. They're still making the smaller models. They could have very easily made them bigger. In fact, they could probably do that right now. And two, cameras have a zoom function. I don't know if you know this, but cameras have a zoom function. So realistically, when you set up that camera, 3 to 4 feet away from the table, and you're looking down at the models, you can zoom in on the models. And if I'm being completely honest with you, it's not like the models are moving by themselves. So you literally can have the guy move the models, set up in position, and the camera then just can zoom in and look at all the pretty models. Like, it's kind of insane. Like, this is like, when I heard this in the video, I was like, okay, I need to make a response about this because this is just a really stupid idea. And he says this with so much certainty that I was like, okay, I'm in for a really wild ride here. Okay, so we'll talk about now the general shift towards tournament play, or tournament-only play, as he says. This is also incorrect. Now, when we talk about GW, we have to talk about GW as a whole. I know 40K is the moneymaker. It is a large moneymaker for GW. I am not going to deny that at all. But even if you look at just 40K only, you have 40K, which is like, the base game. You have Combat Patrol, for better or for worse. I've heard that the Combat Patrol format is vastly inferior to the Spearhead format, but it is a more casual way to play 40K because it's a much smaller army. It's not like a 1,000-point army. It's sub 1,000-point battles. And then you also have Kill Team, which is also a very, very casual way to play 40K, as is you basically only have maybe 5 to 12 models sometimes, and you're just playing as a kill team. I don't think that they are getting away from tournament play. Also, they are still releasing Crusade books, or for the AOS side, Path to Glory, which allows for a narrative campaign. And for example, for the 4th edition, the one that I can really speak about, they already were doing Path to Glory campaign before the Twisted Coast, or whatever the newest narrative campaign that they just launched. They were already baked into the codexes, just to use a 40K term, at the very start. So I don't believe that the narrative campaign way to play Age of Sigmar or 40K is ever going away. It's just, it would be just very stupid if they, it would be astronomically stupid. It would be money left on the table. And this is kind of also the one reason why I disagree with it, because he's making a dichotomy where it says, okay, 40K, or rather he's saying GW will do this tournament-only play. And he's saying, well, he's saying that, it's a shame that they're dropping narrative and casual play as they're just focusing on tournament play. It's like, no, they're not just focusing on tournament play. They're raising both at the same time. So we'll talk about, he goes on and he talks about shop sizes. And I'll play a clip of what he talks about when it comes to shop sizes.
It's far more economical for Games Workshop to not have games in stores. Why? Because Twitch does that heavy lifting for them without them needing to run intro games, without them needing to have people coming in off the street and taking up valuable retail space. And by the way, if you don't have games in stores, your stores can get smaller, and that saves you yet more money on storage space, on people who need to run these games that need to pay for their time, and also store space. Your rent goes down, right? Moving gaming to be tournament only makes complete economic sense to Games Workshop.
Alright, okay, so multiple things about shops. And if I get to, now this is where I might be incorrect, but I believe Northern Exile once worked at a GW store as a manager. I believe this is the case. Because I'm pretty sure he said that or he alluded to doing something similar in the video he did with Morty and Glory. And again, Morty and Glory is a good channel. I actually do highly recommend Morty and Glory. They're great, especially if you're a Guards player. They're fantastic. However, he confuses marketing with selling. The reason why GW, or even I'm not going to say GW. I'm going to even zoom out. The reason why your local friendly game store, your friendly local game store, wants you to play in their store and paint in their store is because they want you to spend the most time in their store. Why? Because the more time you spend in their store, the likelihood of you buying something increases. If they didn't have that, you would spend less time in the store and thus less, even if you're just checking out the store and checking out the models or whatnot, you're going to be less likely to spend. It is store ergonomics. For an example, I'm going to show you a map of how my store that I go to in my town is laid out. As you can see, you walk through the front door. On the right, you got the front desk. Left, you got the D&D stuff. You walk past the paints. And then you go to the wall where it's all the Warhammer. It's just a massive wall of Warhammer. And then on to the left of the wall is the game tables. Now, you play at the game tables, and more likely or not, every time you move your head, either left or to the right, depending on where you're on the table, you're looking at the models. And you play your game, and maybe you won, or maybe you lost, or, you start talking about models and stuff like that, and you're like, yeah, that's actually really cool. Maybe I'll pick up a model. Wham, the model's right there. You go, you pick up the model. You get it from the shelf. You're like, okay. And then what you do, you walk past the paints. And you're like, well, you know what? Maybe I want to try a different color scheme. And then you pick up a paint. then the store got you. Then the store has got, your money out of your wallet. Why? Because the store allowed you to play in the store. Or rather, the owner allowed you to play in the store. And at the same time, we're talking about like stores in general. Most of the time, they don't even offer, actually some require you, if you're playing like all day or like a massive tournament, a table fee. So it's extra money for doing no work for them. The last tournament I went to, it was a $20 buy-in. And the tournament lasted for 4 hours. And there was about, how many of this? There's about, I think 10 people showed up. So the store made, in those 4 hours, $200. Straight up. Without even us buying anything, he got paid for the time. And all we really did was just use his tables. And we were going to use the tables anyways, to be completely honest with you. He also makes the point that because GW wants to focus on tournament play, which they can stream on Twitch, they can get rid of the game tables in the store and instead have the game tables have just a TV broadcasting it on Twitch, because if you broadcast a tournament on Twitch, more eyes are going to look on the tournament, which is true. However, again, if you're looking at the tournament on Twitch, you can do that at your house, and you're not going to be in the store. And if you're not in the store, you're less likely to buy something. And if we're going to be completely honest, if you watch it on Twitch, there is nothing saying that you will not go to the store. Oh, sorry, there's nothing saying that you will then go to the store and pick up models because you saw the tournament on Twitch. You just might remain a tertiary or secondary fan for the rest of your time and just watch the tournaments on Twitch and not even pick up a model. That would be disastrous for GW. Especially if they got rid of the paint stations and the tournament and the playing tables, right? It's just, it makes no sense why he thinks that just because you market something on Twitch, meaning you can get rid of the game tables in the stores. Now, he lives in Britain, or like he lives on like the Isles, I'll just say. I don't know if it's Britain. He might be in Scotland. I don't know. God help you, might be in Ireland. So, I've been to those stores. Okay? I've been to a few up in the north. And compared to a North American store, they're already kind of on the small side. Like, not going to lie. They're not cramped, but they're on the small side compared to a North American store. A North American Games Workshop store, or even a North American hobby store. They're on the small side. And he makes the point that because if you get rid of the game tables, you can have more storage space. You can have smaller stores, and you can go, and the rent will decrease because you have a smaller store. So, no, that's kind of not how it works. Let me just cut that up for a bit. The stores, you can, again, you can have more stock in your stores. But going back to store ergonomics and how big a store is, there's a bit of a prestige thing when it comes to having a larger store. If you have a really small, cramped, dingy store, people are not going to necessarily want to be in there. You know, like people like a little bit of space when it comes to the store. They don't want it cluttered with everything. They want a little bit of, room to breathe, as it were. Two, rent will not decrease because inflation is something that happens every year. Have fun with that. And three, if they get rid of the games tables and then downside, that means that they're finding another storefront, which means that there's moving costs and there's relocation costs. And if they relocate to like the other side of a city, I know that some of the British cities are rather small and fairly cramped, but they might lose some customers because the customers just can't, or just it's inconvenient for the customer to go to that store. They might go to instead of a GW store, they might go to a local hobby store or whatnot. So this whole thing about stores being able to get smaller, have more stock in them, and then somehow bring in more money just because GW is broadcasting tournaments on Twitch doesn't really pass the test. Now we're going to talk about now let's talk about Now Northern Exile does spend a lot of time talking about the theme of 40k, and one of the theme of his video is that 40k is losing its edge, or GW is losing its edge, because it wants to get rid of the grimdark. The mainstream audience, can't handle the grimness and the darkness of the 40k setting. Which I'll remind you that this game that I do love, and I do love to paint the models, is rated 12 and up. Okay, it's rated 12 and up. But apparently, 40k is just so grim and so dark that the mainstream just can't handle it. Now, when it comes, and he references something that's rather infamous, and that's the Demon Calabla. Now, the Demon Calabla is basically the broodmother from Dragon Age Dragon Age Origins, rather, is the broodmother from Dragon Age Origins, although it did appear in Dragon Age Inquisition as a small side point. It's basically using a broodmother to make space marines, where they take a human female, they pump her full of, basically chaos magic, bloat her to some monstrous size, and they basically cut open the belly so someone can actually literally like walk into it. And they'll take a fully grown, or rather, I think it's like a child slave, if I remember correctly, or like adolescent, and they'll throw it into the womb, and the womb will basically like mutate the person inside, and they'll come out with no flesh. And if they pass the physical inspections, they become a Chaos Space Marine, or they get trained to become a Chaos Space Marine. And if they don't pass the physical inspections, they just get flushed down the toilet. They literally get flushed down the toilet. They run into a sewer system on this chaos planet. Now, if you actually look at like the description of a Demon Calabla in the book that it came from, which is Dark Skies and Black Sun, I believe, it's actually rather tame. And it is actually rather tame when it comes to the description. They could have been a lot more gory with it. They could have been a lot more devious and just gruesome. Hell, I read Scaventide recently, and the amount of people who get their eyes gouged out, and the mutation you see, the Skaven mutating the land, like you see in that book, it happened twice, where a Skaven will bite somebody, and they get infected, and then a couple hours later, like their guts start to just writhe, and these mutated like little Skaven pups just burst out in like a shower of gore and just like kind of like mew about, kind of like the chestburster scene of Aliens. And like this one scene, and one of the times, it like ripped somebody in half because there was like 4 of them, and just all flail about, and like, yeah, a lot of gruesome stuff. That's just body horror. The Demon Calabla is not SA, it's not grape. It's just body horror. And it's not really that bad, because it's not like they're saying the Demon Calabla was a bad thing. It's saying that, oh yeah, here is the Chaos Space Marines doing something evil. And he keeps on trying to make the point of like, oh, again, like the mainstream audience just can't handle that. The mainstream audience loved Game of Thrones. Now, what did great Game of Thrones have? Well, it has a lot of murder, has a lot of sex, which, funny enough, GW is starting to introduce a lot more kind of sexual relationships into the stories, which I think is great. Although they're not graphic with it, but they're just saying like, hey, for example, the Stormcast have sex. They just point that out. There's incest, rape. Like, when's the last time in 40K you heard rape or rape of a main character, of a named character? You didn't, okay? This is not like Berserk. This is not Game of Thrones. 40K is rather sanitized. It might be, 40K might be grimdark, and which is a bit of a code word for pessimistic nihilism, but it's still rather sanitized when it comes to the evilness of the setting. The most evil thing that people will do will maybe torture you a little bit and kill you. But they don't go to the sexual. And again, like the mainstream audience, when you look at like what they consume, they love the sexual. Like if you go up to like a mainstream person and say, here's one of the Chaos Gods, Slanesh, okay, and you describe that he's the twisted prince of pleasure, that he's all about, gratification and excess and obsession, they're immediately going to think, like everyone thought when they first got in 40K, oh, Slanesh is the god of rape. But when you look at the 40K or even Age of Sigmar, you see very little rape going on. In fact, it's almost like it doesn't even happen in the setting. So yes, the mainstream audience can handle 40K, which is why there is currently a TV show being made on Amazon, for better or for worse. But you can definitely, 40K can definitely ramp up, and the mainstream audience will still go with it. He does also make a point of saying that the Black Templars are just a bit too edgy for the mainstream audience, because they have the German Iron Cross as one of the major symbols. And my God, dude, there's a TV show called Man in the High Tower. Oh, sorry, Man in the High Castle. That's all about Nazis. That's Nazis taking over America. They can handle the German Iron Cross, okay, and a bit of religious imagery when it comes to crusading. The mainstream audience can handle that. They're not as, I guess, whingy or clutching their pearls as you think they are. And I would even fight back to saying that even in the current lore or the books that are coming out when it comes to the Black Library, it's still just as pessimistic and just as grimdark as it's always been. Again, if you look at a book called Death Worlder, fantastic book, which is all about a planet that is in the final stages of the Tyranids winning. So the Tyranids have won and they're consuming the planet, and there's this basically a suicide mission that these group of guardsmen have to go on. And you just see that's all the bleak hopelessness of the story. It's still there. Everything is still there. Or you look at, again, Scaventide, if you want body horror. I was actually shocked at how much body horror is in Scaventide. I wasn't expecting that. Or if you look at, Hallowed Grounds, if you want really gruesome displays of just people getting ripped apart and killed. It's still in the stories. And he says that he's more of the fluff guy, which is nothing wrong. Instead of being a crunch guy who plays the game, he's more about the fluff and the narrative play and everything else like that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to knock him on that. But he also makes mention that he normally just plays 3rd edition or one-page rules. And I'm not even sure if he reads current lore. This actually pick up a book and reads the lore instead of reading what other people say about it online. Because there seems to be a disconnect having, someone like me who's, still, I haven't consumed every of all the new books coming out, but I consume a fair amount. And it's just, I just really don't know where he's coming from saying that the lore is getting sanded down. I mean, maybe if he's talking about the female custodies, But like even like the female custodians, as they made a description of them on the Tithe. And speaking of the Tithe, there's an amazing episode. I believe it's the second episode of the Tithe, where it's the guardsmen who have to go onto a planet and take the tithe of ammunition, but on that planet they're fighting off an orc invasion. And like, if you really want to look at like the pessimistic nature of, and just like the horrors of bureaucracy in the 40K setting, watch that episode. I highly recommend it. Like, it's GW can still make these stories, and are still making these stories. So maybe it could be a bit of a syndrome of being online too much, because again, he is a 40K content creator, and maybe he is just consuming 40K vicariously through the ups and downs of whatever the culture war is happening online at the moment. That may be happening, and that's maybe where he's getting most of his information. So, although I will say that I could be wrong on this. He might actually still, read the stories that are coming out. I don't think he is, though. Judging by what he's saying, I don't think he is. But again, I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'll fully admit to it. I would also like to point out, speaking of 40K, sanding off its edges, Caiaphas Cain. Caiaphas Cain has been around for a very long time, and Caiaphas Cain is a goddamn comedy in the 40K setting, and it's been there for a very long time. And I'll be honest with you, I think Caiaphas Cain might be even slowing down, because I know with the Caiaphas Cain, like the heyday was, almost like a decade plus ago. And the Caiaphas Cain, hero of the Imperium, who's either a hero with a massive complexion about it, or the world's most luckiest coward, who just kind of makes a bit of a joke of the setting. It's just like, no, there's, even in the before GW moved the plot forward, because it really needed to move the plot forward in 40K, there was still humor, and there was still, lightness in the lightness in the setting, particularly again with Caiaphas Cain, which it's Caiaphas Cain. It's just a complete joke. A wonderful book series, by the way. Highly recommend the Caiaphas Cain novels. Sandy Mitchell is an amazing author. Now, there is more that he made in the video. Again, it's like a 30-minute video. But I really don't want to go through all the points, because this really isn't like a nitpicking video. I just kind of want to get my thoughts across and saying that it's kind of like 5-year doom and gloom plan that he kind of laid out for 40K. He lays it out for 40K, but he keeps on saying GW. So it's just like, hey, what is it? Because GW is larger than 40K. And this is why I don't think he's actually paying a lot of attention to what's actually going on, because he is completely excluding Old World and Age of Sigmar. And I'll remind you, although Old World didn't crack top 10 last season when it came to miniatures being bought, they actually got beaten out by a Game of Thrones miniature series. But Age of Sigmar still came in 4th, which was behind, this is off my top of my head. 40K was on top. I think it was Marvel 2nd. And then 3rd was Battletech, 4th was Age of Sigmar. So, yeah, Age of Sigmar is still a moneymaker. And we can kind of see that it's going into a more, in fact, I'll even say that probably it's going into an even more casual setting, casual form of play when you actually come look at it. Because although the tournaments are in the 2 to 3K range, they're really banking on the war cry, the spearhead, combat patrol, like that, like smaller type of gameplay, because and it's smart too, because shelling out $500 for like a 2K army is a big axe. Like, it's just a big, it's a big chunk of money, and it's a lot of time too, painting and everything else like that. But if GW just asks you, like, hey, here's a spearhead box, here's everything you need to play spearhead, you can still use this in normal gameplay, but here's a slightly simplified rule set system, here's all the models you need, you can play it as soon as you assemble these models, have fun. And I think the spearhead has really been popular with Age of Sigmar, and I actually hope that, although 40K has the combat patrol. I really hope that they just actually retool the combat patrol just to be a copy of Spearhead, because Spearhead is a vastly better system. And actually, and I'll go even one step further than that, I would say that I hope that they have a Spearhead type of gameplay when it comes to the old world, because although they have the battalion-sized boxes and stuff like that, I really do think that the old world could benefit from a style of play that was a little bit more simplified and at a lower price range and a lower point when it comes to the game. So like, 1,000 points or like maybe sub 1,000 points, and like try to go with that. Not like Mordheim levels of like smallness, but like like the happy medium. Maybe like a hero and like a hero, two things of infantry, or like the equivalent infantry and like a monster, like that type of like gameplay, and like try to like work within that boundaries. I think that'd be like really cool. And I think like if Old World got that, they would be making more money than it currently is. I know Old World is a specialty. It's labeled under the specialty kind of banner. It's not a mainline with like 40K or Age of Sigmar, but I think if they want to make the jump from specialty to mainline, they're going to have to do something around that lines. All right, so that was a bit of a ramble. In fact, I think that this entire video is a bit of a ramble itself. However, I hope I made my point across that Northern Exile, although again I bear no ill will against him, I think that the points he made in the video are just incorrect, and it just comes off as somebody who thinks they know about the hobby, and they probably know a lot more than I do. I'll probably admit that. But they're drawing the wrong conclusions because they're probably spending a lot of that hobby time online and getting a lot of that information from online sources and being too influenced by that. Again, could be wrong, but this is just the feeling I get from watching that video and watching other videos that I've seen from him. Again, I think I watched like 4 or 5. Because like if it was just like a one-off video that he just was wrong about, that's okay. But like, yeah, there's a bit of a pattern going on here. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, let's have a discussion in the comment section and tell me how I'm completely wrong and I should be, tarred and feathered for my heresy. Shot out of a cannon. And I'll see you guys later, and I hope you guys had a good time.